Test test. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Nice. First try. That's a rare happening. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good.
Thanks for the thanks for the GIF, China. Yeah, man, it's hard to follow that memorial with business talk. Thanks for that, no future and Goobs, but I'm sure both those guys would have it no other way. So, um, yeah, we had one proposal that ended this week. We had already reached quorum as of last week, but now the vote is officially over 4 days ago. That was Agate 145, adjusting quorum requirements and increasing voter XP, which ended with we actually hit 113%, 113% quorum reach with 90, almost 95% in favor. Awesome. Uh, so thanks to everybody who voted this time around. There were a couple topics that were uh, had a lot of activity this week. I posted them in the DAO Call Agenda channel. So it's really up to you guys where you want to start. I think Ditchy is going to be joining us to talk about the draft for the establishing a discretionary fund and excuse me, and administrative strategy for the Aavegotchi DAO Foundation. No Future started that thread. I'm sure he has some input on that. No Future. So you were cool with the draft as it was, but I noticed you were the last one to comment in that thread. What language do you want to see like included in the proposal, or would you rather establish those roles that you were talking about with the compensation beforehand?
Yeah, I'd rather establish those roles beforehand because the current language that's in there basically is ordering, if I'm not mistaken, the interim directors, which me and Choina are. We're talking, when I say interim directors, we're talking about officers as listed on the Cayman Islands Foundation documents. Currently, it's me, Choina, and then our supervisor nominee, which is through Lotusha. So the language in the forum proposed, I mean the proposal that is the draft, it basically is stating that part of this the SIG prop and core prop, once it passes, would have the interim directors, which I guess is me and Choina. Now it would be our duty to source out at least three candidates for our Cayman Island, or our DAO legal representation to have on retainer. We have to source and interview a few of them, and then we would have to draw up some documents related to roles of the directors. And I just don't. That's outside of the scope of our current positions as multi-sig signers. I know Choina has said he does not want to participate in that. I just don't think it's fair that the DAO can order me to have to do work that I had no intention of doing, especially after I've done all this like stuff already, like pro bono, essentially. Like, hey, I'm helping out, but I don't respect a sig prop basically telling me I have to do something when it's not really my role, just because my name was put down in that role.
Right. So like it would have to be made official first, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if what I think we need to do, we need to create the annual budget. That's the starting point, and then we can start looking into doing the legal representation for the DAO. But before we do that, we need to settle these things with the director, like the officer roles, because it's unfair to expect me and Choina to have to take on that role. Now I have to, I'm taking on the legal risk of the DAO, but I also have to take on the risk of making sure I can pick legal counsel for us appropriately and then draft documents up. That's outside of the scope and preview of what our roles are as multi-sig signers. That's not what we signed on for. And there's plenty of documentation that we can point to that says that that's none of that is our responsibility. So it's just like, I just want to make sure that's clear, because I don't think it's fair to force that on me, especially through like a sig prop, because sig props and core props are supposed to be for like on-chain activity. So to think that an on-chain vote can force me as a human to do work that's outside of my scope as, you know, like an employee for the DAO is like not ideal in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. And I think the proposal would have to mention the position by name. So like that would have already had to been established. It needs to happen before this proposal actually goes up. And I'm just trying to understand like what's the process that we go about that. I know that previously we've talked about the differences for sure in just the directors who are currently everyone is called a director, but we made the distinction between the people who are going to be signers and then the ones who are going to take on a little bit more of that responsibility, as well as compensation for those directors. So there wasn't really any pushback in regards to that. There was like a couple different suggestions about what the compensation should be. I know that you put your opinion down. Others were like, yeah, it's a you know it's kind of like a heavy load. Um, so I don't think there was really any pushback as far as I can remember. But how do we go about kind of making that distinction official, and then also getting the DAO to agree on the compensation? I think they're already in agreement. I'm just saying like it needs some kind of proposal to make it official, right? Does that come before this?
Yeah, so I think what is the problem with this proposal draft right now is I think the first proposal needs to be the setup of an annual budget so that we know that we're paying Lotusha properly, and then you know we have that set in place, those guardrails. Then the second discussion we have is, do we have an election for these roles, what the compensation for is, and then choosing these roles. And then once that's done, then we can have the discussion of what is like in that discussion, we can kind of set out what the roles entail. And then we can put up a vote, have a prop where we choose the people to be in these roles, and then we go and we start having them actually do the role, the responsibilities of the role, like picking legal counsel and then drafting up, you know, any additional documents that need to be done on behalf of the DAO. It's like we should do these things in order instead of like one mega omnibus
Right.
bill that kind of like, because we don't have the infrastructure to do that right now.
Right. I see Ditchy is here. He's posting some of the text from the draft. GM, sir.
GM to you too, sir. Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing quite all right. Well, since the current conversation is centering around the budget deliverables section of the proposal, I'll be happy to weigh in right there. So this rolls back to something that we were discussing a few weeks ago, that proposals need to have a tighter control over the treasury. And in the sense that rather than just issuing money out the door with no performance indicators, with no deliverables, with nothing in return for it, there should be deliverables on every one of our proposals. So in the scope of this one, work to make it as non-invasive as possible. And so the deliverables that are listed up there, let me go ahead and make sure there's a clear distinction between 1, 2, and 3. So number 3 is the foundation directors will interview. So this is a punt, not putting it on the shoulders of the interim directors who are in position now. It is for, in the future, the DAO should have legal counsel so that we can call on them to ask about the legality of any decisions that we want to make or any vote we want to pose. And that decision, once it is selected by the foundation company directors and approved by the DAO, will then allow the treasurer to release the $10,000 retainer that would be pre-approved in this agreement. That's section number 3. Section number 1 and section number 2 are really just about being able to have a continuity of operations when these roles roll over. So as it stands right now, Maxi Crouton has a number of roles that he performs in, he or she, I'm not sure which, performs in the treasurer role, such as giving us a monthly accounting of the treasury positions, plus a couple other things that I'm not familiar with. The same thing with the interim directors. The phone calls with Letitia, the annual renewals. So all I'm really asking for here in this deliverable is for Choina and No Futuristic to take a couple minutes to sit down, go to ChatGPT, and write up 2 paragraphs describing what their role is, so that it's easy to hand it off to the next person if they decide to step down from the interim position on the next vote.
Yeah, the thing is, it's not that simple, and it's still outside of the scope of what we signed up for as signers. So yeah, I could run to ChatGPT, but that opens up that I could be wrong. I'm not an expert. I was put into this role not because of my expertise, but because I guess my name was first because it starts with an A. Like there's like to depend on me to do this is unfair, and same thing for Choina, I think. And these are things that like this is where our legal counsel or like leaning on Lotusha can do this. But to be honest, I've already spent a lot of time dealing with this. That it was not. This is not my problem to deal with, other than me trying to take the initiative and solve this because everybody else was about to quit the foundation essentially. So it's just I don't think it's fair to put this on us, even if it's to you just a few more minutes. Like my time is my time. I shouldn't have to be forced to give it up via a DAO vote, especially when I'm not part of it.
Well, would you consider it fair that if we held an election to replace the interim directors with a more permanent role, would you be willing to take the time to educate your replacement on what you have done in the role so that they wouldn't be starting blind?
The thing is, I haven't done anything in this role. Literally, all I did was I was asked by the DAO, and I stood up and said, "Hey, we need to basically." Pixelcraft was like, They told us like, "Hey, we're supposed to contact the CorpSec and let them know that new directors are coming on." And then I contacted them. We tried contacting them. CorpSec was like ghost basically at that point. So then like there is no set role in this. We don't even know what the roles are technically for these officer positions. We just literally have been placed in them. What I've done so far, the closest thing that I've heard it like described as is basically a secretarial administrator for the DAO, where I am like kind of relaying information between the DAO and our corporate secretary, not necessarily as an officer, because doing that, I can remain anonymous and, like not a meat shield, where with this, there are roles that I'm not even 100% certain of. So like, it would be, I can't even tell a person, I guess I can go to ChatGPT and figure that out. But, then my counter is, why can't anybody else? Why that shouldn't have to fall on me as a duty. Now, to be clear, if we go and have an election and do all this other stuff, I would be interested in running for this role. But I don't want to keep constantly being pushed into this role prior without my permission. Like if there's an election and I can opt in, then I'm fine with that. But right now it's like, I've heard it multiple times, that's my responsibility. And it's like, no, it's not. Like we have an agreement that was signed, and that's the one I'm sticking to. I'm not allowing any more scope creep, because there is a line in the sand where I have to put my foot down and say, hey man, like this needs to stop. Like, so I do agree. That's why I say that we have to segment this prop a little bit more. Once we establish a secondary prop that is electing these people and choosing who the 2 people on the foundation should be for the officers' roles, that makes perfect sense to me. And then we can move forward. And then, in that role, I'll know what specific duties I'm supposed to have. And then I can make an informed decision on whether or not I want to be a meat shield at that level. Right now, I don't know that. And I'm taking a lot of assumptions from, and not to be rude, people who I don't know if they're actually experts in this field. So this is why I think, before we do anything, we should settle up with the make sure our annual fees are good, and then consult with Lotusha or with legal counsel so that we can know better what we should do for our structure. Because I have talked to Lotusha a little bit, but even with them, it's constantly pinging Tim Rabble, aka Johnson, and then waiting for him to get back. So it's the information flow isn't as smooth as everybody thinks. It does require me multiple times to go to him. Now, this isn't extensive work, but it's not my work. So I just want to make sure that, you know, like, we're honoring the agreements that we have, which is I'm a signer and I sign transactions. I'm a monkey with a ledger. Being pushed into a position where I'm taking on significant liability for the DAO is not ideal unless we have a more formal agreement, which includes, like, you know, like an actual governance process where we pick, you know, go through an election. Like, I don't want to just be picked to be an officer. If we have to vote these people in, or if in the Constitution it says something specific that the DAO directors can choose these positions, that's fine. Then we can go through the process. I just don't want to usurp the process or be forced into additional work that's not on my table.
Right. I don't think the original, like, props have anything to, this is all unprecedented, right? This is all new territory. So, like, what I understood from the time that we've been in contact with the people at Lotusha was that we were kind of taking steps to just make it so, right? We're establishing the framework so that then moving forward, we'd have a system by which we did these things. But that these positions needed to be fleshed out. We needed to understand who was doing what, and then the people who are taking on more responsibility, like the new positions that differ from just being the multi-sig signers. Everything's official. Everything's kind of like laid out in plain language, and we understand what everyone's responsibilities are. So the fact that we've never done this before, I guess that's where a lot of this is coming from, right? You took it upon yourself to kind of contact these guys and see what's what. So, I mean, in the time that we've talked about it, there hasn't really been any pushback from the DAO as far as, like, who would occupy these positions, because there are 9 directors that have been voted in right now, and they're currently serving their term. I think we're like 5 or 6 months in. So for us to do anything, I feel like we would have to kind of consult with these people who have already been elected by the DAO. I think that's where a lot of this pressure that you're feeling comes from. So, I mean, moving forward, I think you said you would be willing to do this job as long as you were compensated for it, correct?
And it's formal, yes, because right now, like Choin is kind of alluding to, we are like in a position, a very precarious position, where we're like kind of being pushed into making discretionary choices, which opens us up, specifically me and Choina, to huge liability, because we are the ones that have been like KYC'd at the highest level for Lotusha. So it's like there has to be a point where we stop that, because it's like, wait, if we're gonna do this, let's do this officially, and not like kind of like halfway, because you're putting me at greater legal risk. My son is here visiting me right now. Like, I don't want to have to explain to him why he can't go to college because I got sued.
Right.
Okay. Well, I can speak directly to that phase.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't think we should blow the scope of this proposal out of proportion here. We all understand that the current foundation directors were pushed into a role of responsibility that they didn't sign up for, nor did they campaign for. And so this is an interim role that they are currently stuck with. So it is absolutely the highest priority that we figure out what the compensation plan is for the ongoing role, start campaigning, and put an election process together in order to replace the interim roles. And at that point, the ongoing annual budget and costing of this operation can be put in the hands of the people that actually want to take on that liability. As far as the one-time transactions in the proposal, this proposal is broken down into 3 pieces. Here's the first one. This is the one-time transactions, the initial foundation administrative budget. This is what Pixelcraft has already fronted us the money for in order to bring the company into compliance from the past 3 years that it wasn't taken care of. The second piece of it is general counsel. That can easily be punted down the road into the role once we have a more permanent foundation director in place that wants to take care of that. And then the third one is the revolving transactions here. This is the annual ongoing budget that replaces this $17,000 that Pixelcraft fronted us. Because we won't have all of the late fees and non-compliance issues, we're looking at only $14,000. Let me add that in, $14,000 a year. So in this proposal, I am making no requests for the interim directors to take on more liabilities or more duties at all. It's simply good business practice that once they step out of the role, they would share what they have done in that role with their replacement so that the next person coming into the role doesn't have to start from scratch. Simple things like, when does the fiscal year end? What are the deadlines for doing the renewals? And that could be as simple as, answering that question right here in the chat. And that could be considered the continuity of operations document. So when you spoke to Latuja, I believe it was a March to March fiscal year that the compliance has to be renewed on, but not asking anyone to name the responsibilities of their roles, simply asking for them to document what they have done while they were in the role. And that's the difference between adding more liability to your plate and making sure that we have a smooth operation going forward.
I see Foreign commented, let's just have an election for interim foundation directors and reimburse Choina in no future for the time, expenses, and unexpected risk. So like, no future, is that the direction you'd want to go with it, is to have an election first? And then, because you're saying you're basically willing to take on the responsibility as long as it's all voted on, right? It's made official. So is that the first step?
I still think that the first step is to approve an annual budget, like that we know, hey, going forward, we have this amount of money that Lotush is charging us, because we know from them, they said it's going to be $6K a year plus the $2K for the supervisor plus incidental. So if we have to make changes like what we're about to do with officers, stuff like that, legal compliance, like 194 is saying, legal compliance is never going to end. So setting up our annual budget that just basically pays for compliance, that I think comes first, even though we don't necessarily need to approve that right now, because our new year starts, I guess, in March or April of next year. So we do have time on that. My opinion is we do that first, because that establishes that we are because if we do an election for who should be officers, and then the vote for our annual budget fails, and the DAO is really signaling that we should go fully on chain and move away from a foundation, then it's kind of a waste of time, and we'll end up paying people salaries that we don't need to pay, right? So the first temperature check is annual budget, because if the DAO says we don't want an annual budget, that's a clear indication that maybe we should be considering doing away with the foundation and moving to a fully on-chain DAO, which I think is, that's not my choice to make, but that's, if we're going to go in the order of operations, that seems like it makes sense. If that does pass and we are cool with keeping a foundation, doing that, the next step is to be fully compliant. We have to fill these 2 roles, and then we can lay out what these roles have in them. We can seek guidance from Lotusha, then we set up the roles and then vote from them with compensation, and then going from there, part of that vote is doing whatever, like in terms of sourcing out legal counsel, creating documents and clear specifications of like the roles like beyond just like what the roles do, but also making sure that the DAO is doing the rest of the compliance stuff, like regular minutes, having regular meetings, and making sure that we are communicating back to our corpsec whenever any big changes are happening. Sorry, my kid's yelling in the background.
Interesting. Okay, so with that said, like, what would you? I'm sure you took some time to read the draft that Ditchy posted. So like what, because that's for establishing the budget, right? So what changes would you make to that? Like what edits would you make if you wanted that proposal to go up first before, let's say, an election for those roles?
So it would be, I guess, point 1 and 3, which would be picking. It's part of the deliverables. Having the interim directors pick, document roles and create like a document or of some sort that's like stating what these roles should be doing, and then the part about having the directors like source legal counsel for us. Everything else related to like the actual expenditures that we have to approve on an annual basis is fine, I think, because there's no like you're not requesting anybody to do anything outside of like, hey, make sure that we have these funds set aside on an annual basis. Lotusha does accept crypto, so it's easy peasy for us to pay them. It's just like straightforward that part of it. Now, the other thing I want to say, we did look at the DAO box, the legal wrapper thing. We haven't gotten much information. I haven't done a lot of research on it to figure out like what other notable entities are using DAO box, which is the main concern that, do we know any DAOs are actually using it? And then there were some concerns regarding the treasury management, because there is like some degree of DAO box like wanting, like we have a treasury, for us to wrap our treasury in them, basically to have a level of control over it, which I don't think is, I have to, like, I'm not a legal expert, so I can't really speak on this, but it doesn't seem very desirable to have that level of centralization. In terms of the compensation, we had floated out numbers between 1K a month and 8K a month. 8K a month representing like close to $100,000 a year. I think 8K a month is way too much for this role. I understand that the meat shields are taking on significant liability, so there is like precedence for paying that much, but I just don't think that the DAO is going to stomach that, nor does it make sense. The opposite end is 1K a month, which I think is just not proper compensation for this role. That is like lower than the poverty rate, like pay for citizens in the U.S. And currently the two interim directors are U.S. citizens. So yes, we can probably source people from outside of the U.S., but it's a level of outside risk that 12K a year. Like I've said, like facilitators are making 2x as much versus this position. And I'm not saying the facilitators don't deserve that. I really do think they do that. But to be the legal backstop for the DAO for a treasury of like $5 or $10 million to pay 12K a year is way too low. So somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, but not either of the extremes, in my opinion.
Immaterial saying DAO box is 6.25K per month for full management. Yeah, I mean, you said you looked into that a little bit, No Future, or?
I did a cursory look, and then I also saw that I think FIFO did a cursory look. The main questions were who are their clients, because we couldn't find that, like a list of that. And then the issue with the treasury wrapping, because this, like, basically what we're doing with Lotusha is our corporate secretary, and they're also suggested our nominee supervisor. So we basically still have like a level of decentralization to a degree, because we have members of the DAO representing the DAO on the corporate documents. So like there nothing crazy can essentially happen by having one party like kind of control the entire DAO, because technically, and Hardcore highlighted this, and me and him were not in agreement on this, that the roles in these officer roles, technically we have a level of discretion where we can just do things without the DAO's permission. Like I was completely against that. But like as like the president and secretary, we can basically veto like treasury spends. And so there's a fear that by centralizing that into one entity, that it could be like a governance risk. So not to disparage DAObox, I just don't know enough about them based on the cursory research that I've done. But that's why we have to be very like careful, because there is a level of discretion that I think that people are downplaying, because yeah, these roles are just like they're governance roles that the Cayman Islands requires us to fulfill, but there is like liability risk to whoever fulfills those roles. And then also with DAObox, there's a level of KYC that might be necessary for the members of the DAO.
Yeah, DAObox is a whole different animal that we would have to do some serious digging into and actually have them get on the phone with us and answer some questions. But I'm going to loop back to what you're referring to, that Hardcore was relaying to you. It's close to the point, but what he was doing was rehashing the information I was giving him about the foundation director's roles in a Cayman Islands Foundation. So I've been doing a much deeper dive on this to find out where we actually are, what position you're in, No Futuristic and Choina. And as it's structured right now, what's expected of a foundation company or a foundation in general, the expectation is that the directors are actually the executive decision makers, which we don't have in our current situation. You're a figurehead in that role. But as a executive decision maker, there's the anticipation that your role would be making budgetary decisions for a fund, be it a hedge fund or a not-for-profit fund or a trust of some kind, because the purpose of a foundation is to pool a large amount of money in a tax-sheltered position and then be able to invest it in outside projects, to pay it, to put it to charities or whatnot. Now, that is the key liability in the role, is when the foundation directors transact with the outside world. Now, since we're in a position here where the directors do not have that executive authority, nor do they have control over the treasury, what's actually set up right now is that the treasurer is independent of that board, which gives kind of a balance of powers, and the multi-sig signers have veto control over any treasury spending. So the DAO makes all of the decisions about what the treasury is going to spend on. The treasurer and the multi-sig signers can veto those decisions, and the directors really have no executive play in this at all. And until you sign an outside contract, open up an outside bank account, or move money in any way that it can be traced through the fiat system, nothing's going to flag a liability.
Yeah, no future. So what I'm getting from you, like kind of in the past couple weeks, is like 12K is too low, 100K is too high, and there's a lot of room to work with in between there. So I think the DAO just kind of needs to be presented with something, and that's probably the most like organic and useful way to get some serious feedback, right? They're going to make it known very clearly, but I think you should have an input, right? If you do decide to take on these roles based on the way we're going about it right now, what is the compensation you're seeking, and then allow the DAO to kind of make a decision on that, and then you can choose from there whether or not you would want to go along with it, and then we'd have to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I feel like
when
it's more of an issue of the DAO kind of has to set out what the compensation is, and then I decide if I want to take that level of risk for that compensation. And,
right, but
yeah,
like
the first step though is the annual budget.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, for me, the first step is the annual budget, because if an annual budget fails and the DAO is signaling that we don't want a foundation anymore, because there has been arguments that, like, because of regulatory risk, like kind of decreasing in the U.S. at least, that a foundation might not be necessary. There was like a article dropped, I think, by Zbot a few weeks ago that were kind of highlighting this a little bit. So it wouldn't make sense to like have an election and then like ratify or like basically put into place these officer roles where we're paying people a salary basically for the next year, and then we find out that the DAO doesn't in fact want to be a foundation, and then now what do we do then? So it makes more sense to, like, are we going to continue as a foundation? Are we willing to have our annual expenses set up and paid? And then from there, we can have a DAO discussion on what we think fair compensation is. Like I said, I personally think 1K is too low. 8K, which would be like 100K a year, is way too high. There is like a middle ground somewhere, but I don't want to be the one that is like, because once again, this is like, I have to make a decision for the DAO to move forward. That's not the deal that we have. Like I decide if I want to go for the job based on what the DAO is offering.
Well, we don't have to lock into a 1-year contract on anything, whether we're going to pivot to another operation like a structure like fully on chain. I mean, we've got smart contracts and we've got multi-sig signers. It could be as easy as, yes, we will pay X amount of money to this position over the year, but you're going to get paid on a monthly salary. And at any point, if the DAO decides to dissolve the foundation and go fully on chain, we simply turn off the salary payment. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that.
Yeah, I agree. But even spending 1 month on salary, if we decide that we don't want the foundation, is a waste of our very, very, very precious funds at this point.
So it begs the question then, and I post this to everybody in the chat right now. As part of our operation, are we more interested in doing 100% on-chain transactions and a focus on the game development, or do we want to entertain the options of investing our remaining treasury to grow it, and that might include transactions in fiat? I guess I'll post the poll up.
Yeah, a couple of people are typing.
I agree with Phantasma that the 100K per year is ridiculous. It does sound ridiculous. It only sounds ridiculous until someone gets sued, because you're taking on the risk, and our treasury is millions of dollars. So if something were to come to a head and a lawsuit happened, the two people in, because the supervisor position, the nominee supervisor is just like kind of like, they're not gonna take on liability. I've done some research on this. The majority of the liability does fall on the two officers. So I don't know that DAObox will disperse that liability. Like, are they going to take on a lawsuit and defend us in that sense? I don't honestly know. But that's why that number was it was kind of floated out by Ditchy based on like current industry practices for these type of roles. Now, these kind of roles don't necessarily entail a lot of work. It's literally the risk and the liability that you're taking. So there is like, there's definitely a risk. I personally don't feel like it's a huge risk, like as big of a risk, because I think that we have done stuff relatively correctly. But I want to point out that there are still legal investigations into Aavegotchi. I have confirmed this with people IRL at conferences who know of this stuff and have told me that there are still investigations. So to think that we couldn't be sued is naive. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be paying 100K a year for these roles. I don't think that's smart. But like I said, 12K a year doesn't make any sense.
I think you're correct, Foreign. Since we did renew compliance, that covers us for a year. The foundation is paid for fiscal year 2025.
We could, though, unwind the foundation, right? Like, just go and basically ask them to strike us off. Like, not strike us off in the bad way, because that's part of the reason why this all happened. Our previous CorpSec disappeared. We were at risk of being struck off from the Cayman Islands, which would put the 3 foundation directors who had not known that they were listed as officers, myself, Mycalium, and Choina, at great legal risk. And part of the legal risk was being blacklisted by the Cayman Islands so that we would no longer be able to do business. Honestly, not a big deal to me, because I don't conduct business in the Cayman Islands, but nonetheless, not a risk that I should be forced to take without my acknowledgement or permission. And that's kind of why it took me stepping up and saying, all right, let's facilitate these like CorpSec things, start to like reach out, talk to Latucha, figure out what the process is, because we had like basically 30 days until we lost legal protection for the DAO. Now that happened, the DAO is a member, as Ditchy has said before, we're a member-owned organization. So if we were sued, then the potential of everyone in the DAO being KYC'd goes up significantly. So the DAO-based thing, and I have to, like I said, do more research. I wish we had a lawyer here who could help us with this. Part of this was like requesting a level of KYC of the members of the DAO. So once again, we have to do more research on this. So I don't think it's not that it's completely unviable as a choice, but we just have to make sure that it's a viable choice for us to make.
In all cases, I would recommend we start with legal counsel because rolling up a company has a certain process it needs to go through in order to not open up liabilities, and even more so with the foundation here. So it is a possibility that we could roll it up, but I would recommend against just pulling the trigger immediately without seeking legal counsel first. Of course, that loops us back to this original proposal is, as a DAO, we would have to authorize funding for legal counsel. Somebody would need to select that legal counsel. So since we have an existing foundation that is paid for the following 10 months, March, April, May, June, 9 months, we're already covered for 9 months other than the salaries of the position. There's not much that needs to be done by the directors until the annual renewal comes around. So it sounds like packaging these two proposals together, getting a compensation plan discussed and voted on, and running a new election for the more permanent annual role to fill in the remainder of the 9 months until renewal would be the high priority. And once we have those people in place, they can do the legwork to select the legal counsel, and then we can get our answers on what is the best course of action going forward for the foundation. Do we have any feedback on that?
I'm just taking a look at the chat. Some of the discussion is about, potential legal stuff that we've already kind of been involved in. I mean, the Ovix thing, I don't know what you mean by the investigation that's happening, but yeah, like I don't feel like our DAO is, or even can take the heat for that. Obviously, that's just an opinion, but the material saying, to me, it seems perfectly clear as a DAO, we don't have the legal expertise or knowledge to run the foundation. This is why I'd be much more comfortable with something like DAObox. Yeah, and I think that was the idea with Latuja, right? Like it's the same thing. It's kind of like outsourcing this responsibility for a fee, right? Like those are the services that they offer.
Yeah, which we've done with Lotusha, but the only services they can't perform is those 2 officer positions. We get to choose as many officers as we want. They had basically advised a president and like a secretary or treasurer. The treasurer that we currently have is our on-chain treasurer, so we don't necessarily need one, and that would avoid having basically Maxi Crouton quit because he doesn't want to go through that level of KYC because of MiCA compliance rules. So we can have an on-chain treasurer, and then that's relayed through, I guess, these 2 officer roles, which could be like president or secretary or directors, founder. It depends, like, because I think in our last setup with our foundation, I was listed as the founder, so it wasn't even just a officer. So, but with Latusha, we still need officer positions and stuff. I don't think well, I'm telling you, immaterial, you read it above. UBOs are not included in DAObox. Those are still officer positions that we would need to provide.
Well, having Maxi Crouton, the treasurer role, separate from the foundation is actually ideal because as we're structured right now, we don't want the executive directors to have control over the treasury. We want the DAO to have control over the treasury. So all of the treasury activities, the multi-sig signers and the treasurer role are still part of the DAO as a democratic organization. The foundation directors are really figureheads. They do not have any executive authority other than filing the compliance paperwork on an annual basis. As it stands right now, and as we're discussing moving it forward, that is the only role that the foundation directors will take. And I, for one, am not looking to put the treasury in the hands of the foundation itself. I would rather that stay within the DAO. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, Dalbox could be a viable solution. We should reach out to them somehow and get them on a call so that we can get some things cleared up. The main issues, like I said before, were the treasury wrapping and then the who they've actually worked for as clients so that we know that they're legit. Assuming that they are legit, this could be a perfect solution for us. Just as long as there's not a prop telling me I have to do work as a director that for a position I don't currently have, I'm fine. I'm fine with that 100%.
If we go the DAO box route, my personal position is do not give them control of the treasury, wrapper or not. The DAO should hold on to that, and any monies that need to be spent by DAO box on our behalf, we can funnel it to them on a limited basis. Because unless we want to go through and audit their smart contracts, we won't know what's actually in that treasury wrapper. All right, so no future. What I'm seeing here then is for this proposal for the annual budget, we're looking at the reimbursement to Pixelcraft for what has already been paid for the 2025 fiscal year, plus the ongoing budget that would pay starting fiscal year 2026. We could pre-approve that spending in this proposal, but have the funds still locked up until such a time as they need to be spent, so that we don't have to come back around and do the vote again at some point in the future. And then the third piece is the foundation company general counsel, which we could pre-approve that now, but have it triggered upon the new positions being voted in. So I can put a budget release in here that says, okay, we approved it in this proposal, but the money doesn't get released until those guys get their roles and then interview the legal counsel.
Yeah, my only issue is with that. If we were to go through Dalbox, then there would be nobody. It would be Dalbox that would be filling those officer positions, right? So then would it be their job to find us legal counsel? And then if that's the case, is that a safe move to have them also picking our legal counsel for us?
No, the legal counsel is for the DAO specifically. So if I'm going to kind of mental map out how these two entities work, the DAO is our legislation. We make all the decisions. We own the treasury. The DAO needs legal counsel so that when we go to make a big vote, we can actually talk to a lawyer beforehand and ask them, what impact will this have, and do we want to take this action? Since the DAO is currently doing no transactions that cross the barrier into the fiat world, we don't need that. We don't need the foundation to have that kind of legal representation. So,
Quick question though, is that true though? Because technically we funded the sub DAO of Gotchi Greeters, which does bridge into fiat world, because we enter into contracts to rent automobiles and pay for people's flights. A lot of that we're using buying gift cards with crypto and stuff like that. But technically we are crossing into the fiat world for that.
Do we have a bank account for the foundation?
Currently, no.
Are the funds that transferred into the fiat world traceable through the banking system, or were they cash transactions straight to gift cards?
Some of them are cash transactions straight to gift cards. Others are reimbursements that, for like for me, I get paid for like my service that goes to the fiat world eventually. Or like if we rent a Toro card, I don't know specifically how Light Piglet handled all of it. Mr. Seb would know better because he's taking over the administrative part of things like that for the DAO. So I don't think we don't like Gotcha Greeters doesn't have a bank account, but there are fiat transactions that probably do go through at least gift cards and then reimbursements that eventually, I guess, on the member side go through. But like even then, like if I'm getting paid to go to a conference and for doing work, I probably should be filing a W-4, right? Is, like some kind of tax form. The DAO isn't providing me that. So are those things that we're supposed to be doing? Because we are employing people as well.
Okay, so the next question is, who handled the off ramp? So if the money went from crypto to US dollar, did the DAO do that off ramp, or did they pay you in crypto and then you handled the off ramp?
So for me personally, I handled the off ramp in terms of, I want to say, Toro and like flights and stuff like that. Those are gift cards. So it is the DAO, like basically the sub DAO, the Gotchi greeters would be going through services, I think like Bit Refill or something like that, getting the gift cards and then paying for services in fiat via like a gift card.
Did that platform require KYC for the DAO?
I've never done it, so I don't know. I only do media.
Okay. So to answer your first question about the money transferring, you're not a W-2 employee, so it would be a 1099 relationship. You would be filing as a contractor. If the DAO paid you more than $600 USD in any calendar year, then it is required to issue you a 1099, and that triggers your taxable income event, no matter how it moved through the system.
Okay, so the DAO has actually never done that for any payments to directors or to like gotcha greeter payments or anything like that.
So there you go. Now we're talking about the compliance requirements for the foundation. This would be part of the role of the foundation, and somebody within the foundation would need to be doing this accounting.
Yeah, so Lotusha has said that they can handle these sort of things, but that's why the idea of like the corporate, like not corporate secretary, but the secretarial administrator between the DAO and Lotusha, like basically the person who's going to be relaying to Lotusha like expenses, stuff like that, so that they can properly account for us, because that's part of the service they provide.
Okay. So yeah, so Foreign's saying there are no legal employment contracts in existence, and that's what I expected. So in the event that the DAO wants to continue moving money into the fiat world, signing any kind of legal contract in the real world, we're crossing that barrier. If the DAO is the one that is, well, signing a legal contract, we've crossed the threshold. If the money is moving into fiat, but it's being paid in crypto to the service provider, aka the Gotchi greeter in this case, and then the Gotchi greeter moves it off ramp to fiat, then the DAO, it's up to the greeter to declare that on their taxes.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. But like what Foreign is saying, a legal employment contract, would the facilitator role, because that's an ongoing role that we have compensation for, or the directors, does that count as it's not like specifically an employment contract, but we do have a process that lays out like regular payments based on services delivered over a 1-year period or a 6-month period for the facilitators.
If both if both parties agreed to the terms of the agreement and signed it in some legal fashion, even with a wallet, and money changed hands, you have a legally binding contract. What jurisdiction it's in, what law it falls under, that's all up for debate.
Okay, yeah. So there's like still, we just have to do more research and look into things a bit more, so that we know, so we can have more clarity. I feel like we've had a decent discussion about this. So moving forward, let's bring it to the forums in terms of how to approach the annual budget prop, just so that we can let FaZe, I guess, discuss the other topics, because there's a few other topics, right, FaZe?
Not really. No, nobody wants to talk, unless the chat says otherwise. I don't think I asked the material if he wanted to maybe give an update on the future of Gotchi Battler, but he's leaving now. So he said he'll be posting a SIG prop this week though. was gonna ask Coder Dan maybe if there was any updates with the Hungry Ghosts idea, but he had to leave as well. So I'm guessing those things could just wait till next week. But yeah, I like the direction that you just said what I was gonna say. So what's the action step like moving forward as far as this stuff goes? You guys think between the two of you, at least in that discussion thread, maybe just edit the actual text and then get a proposal up as soon as possible? Is that the best way to just kind of start moving things along?
Yeah, I think we need to have the two conversations in parallel. The annual
Right.
budget and the onboarding of more permanent director roles to replace the interim, and the budget for, or the payment for those roles as part of the same conversation. But it looks to me like the two props need to be developed in tandem, even if they're deployed at different times.
So I guess
Because
the other part of
they're
this
all part
is
of the
to
conversation.
part of the wrench that we're throwing into this is if DAObox is a viable solution for us, then we might have to tweak the annual budget, because if we switch to them, then we'll still have to pay back PC for Lotusha, and then figure out, do we go, and our new annual budget would then be closer to 80,000 a year, or whatever the number was that Immaterial quoted for their services, and that would replace us needing our own member officers. So that adds another wrinkle to this. Is there any way that we can reach out to them and see if they can come on and speak to us and us ask the questions that are pertinent?
Somebody in the chat said that they were already poking the bear, but didn't get any responses.
Okay, so
Can you post up in the chat who made that comment earlier? Was that you, Immaterial? Or maybe Choina? Maybe it was Choina that said that.
I think it might have been. Yeah, I think Immaterial left. But
Okay.
if that were the case, so we're covered, you said, for the fiscal year of 2025 with Lotusha anyway, right? So if it were the case that we were kind of like moving over to DAObox, then what are the changes that would need to happen? It would just have to be edited, essentially, right? We're covered for the year. The budget would only change based on what we're paying for DAObox's services, correct?
Yeah, it could just be an amended prop.
Right.
Look like amended prop. So if, let's say we were to pass this prop today as it currently stands, we will have pre-authorized $14,000 to be spent on annual compliance next year. And if something changes between now and March of 2026, we can simply do a new core prop that says we need an additional $58,000 funding, or we're going to claw back the $14,000 because we're going to do a different path here. And it'd be a one-issue vote.
Right. Yeah, that's what I figured. So I guess moving forward, then we can just get the text of the prop edited in that thread, and then kind of have them both go up. As long as everybody agrees. I do think it's the best way to kind of get the DAO, a real temperature check from the DAO. Like there's about 30, 40 people that show up here weekly, and they kind of pay attention to everything. But everyone else is kind of doing it on their own time. So the only way for us to really get feedback is to kind of post something. Put a proposal up, and it might take another round. Who knows? I don't know how the change to quorum is being dealt with right now. Like if we were to put up a prop this week, is it already adjusted? Does anybody know?
Well, that's the thing. What's posted on Snapshot is just it's kind of the threshold for the vote. But if the multi-sig signers are in agreement that the 7.2 million quorum threshold is in force, then the snapshot vote or the snapshot total or tally doesn't really matter. Like if the tally goes to 8 million and snapshot says we need 9 million, but then the multi-sig signers say we already passed the vote for 7.2 million, we're going to go ahead and execute the transaction.
Yeah, no, foreign saying quorum stated immediate effect. So I think we're good. Um, yeah, I do think that's the best way to move things along now, just to see where we're at with it, and we'll adjust accordingly. But I don't think if a prop goes up this week, I don't think we're gonna like it's gonna be made very clear. But there hasn't really been any pushback. It's almost kind of like the DAO is like, all right, you guys figure it out, make a proposal, and then just let us vote on it.
And we could potentially break these things down into smaller chunks. People will be happier to vote if they can get 3 rounds of XP instead of 1.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea, and it serves its purpose, right? Like you were saying, have both of them run in tandem. Like uh, it's not a bad idea at all. I think it would work.
Okay,
It's just
so
a matter of getting it up there. Yeah.
if I were to break it down, I would say, well, let's throw the Pixelcraft reimbursement portion up as a standalone prop because it's simple. This is what they paid. This is what we agreed to pay them back, and we can get that one out into the ether pretty quickly while we work out the other pieces.
Excellent.
And then we'll see how controversial it is once the sig prop goes up.
Yeah, exactly. There'll probably be more feedback in the thread as well. But the way I usually take it, when there isn't that much back and forth happening in the threads, it's like people kind of, I think the overall sentiment is just, get it done kind of thing. So give them an option to vote on. And then if there's anything controversial, it usually comes up after the fact. So
yeah, we don't get all that much feedback inside the chat.
Yeah, sometimes I think, myself included, like sometimes I'm looking for other opinions first. Like I see the thing that's posted and then I kind of want to see what other people are saying, get a clear understanding of things before I chime in. So I feel like a lot of people do that too. But yeah, with a prop, it just kind of forces your hand a little bit to get involved in one way or another, at least in the vote.
So
Maxi Crouton, but
I
yeah,
guess
sorry, go ahead.
my last point on the topic is that anybody who would want to consider throwing their hat into the ring for the more permanent foundation director role, I would advise drop $300 or $400 on legal counsel just to find out what your liabilities are, the pros and cons of you taking on that role before deciding to move forward with it.
Excellent. Yeah. Good advice. No Future, you got anything else on that?
No, the only other thing I can think of is now that quorum has changed, do you plan on putting the facilitators prop up for I guess another term or ongoing funding?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. We are the end of this month, I believe. That's the end of our current term, right?
Yes. So basically, one more week.
Next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I know Roxiano had something. I think she started drafting it. It's going to be pretty straightforward. We might make minor changes to the term length and see if the DAO is okay with that, just so that we don't keep running the same proposal every couple of months. But yeah, we could totally do that this week. I'll make sure to message her in the chat and find out about that and probably draft it for her too.
Yeah, and then just a general call to action to anybody here that is interested, because I don't think I've seen anyone express interest in wanting to, because usually this is there's an election for these roles. The last time I was the only one interested, and there was a 4th open spot. So if there is any interest, I guess, from anybody else, to make that known, because if not, then we'll just move the forum, the post forward to reinitiate another term.
Yeah, that's a good point. We mentioned that last week too. I'll post something about that in the thread that Roxiano made. I think it was like a week or two ago. Basically, what happened was last time we opened up the position, we said, okay, so like who else? It's people are voting on it either way. So if there was anyone interested in hosting the DAO calls, like kind of make yourself known. And No Future was the only person that like was interested. So in our last proposal that we did this, we kind of just said, okay, can you renew? And we're adding No Future as a fourth member, as per the original prop by Cryptogotchi. So yeah, I'll make mention of that in the thread. And if anyone who listens to these calls weekly, is interested in the role, please do make it known, just so that we'll know what to put in the actual proposal and what that looks like. Yeah, definitely. We'll do that this week as well. And then one last thing we have from Maxi Crouton says, not related, but I made a quick poll for the liquidity migration to base, and he posted a link to that thread there. You guys check it out. I think, I was going to ask you, Maxi, if you were interested in speaking on it, but it's all pretty straightforward. Like, it's a good conversation happening there. So yeah, please check that out. And yeah, he needs to go. Okay. Yeah. Understandable. Yeah, you guys just check out that thread. If you have any input, please, make your voice heard, and then so that we can make these changes official before this final move to base, hopefully. Right. Yeah, it is quite straightforward, exactly. And
just one little alpha drop before we go. There was another thread in the DAO forums that I was running, which was, this is pure fun, and hopefully not a non-controversial one, but we need to get a SIG prop out there to change the title of the multi-sig signers away from directors because of the confusion between the foundation and the DAO roles. And I think what we're going to do is create a naming contest so that everybody can throw their concepts in, and we'll pick one winner and have some kind of reward for the most voted on name. And then that name will go into the SIG prop.
Yeah. Excellent. Let me copy the link to that real quick. Monkeys. Yeah, I like that.
We call them DAO monkey.
I'll take it. Should trademark that. Yeah, monkey with a ledger, monkeys. It's all good.
Hey, that's actually a good title for the role.
I'm not mad at it. I know No Future stands by it too. Like, he coined it. Yeah, but other than that, I think that's it for this week, guys. Thanks a lot, both of you. And thanks to everybody who came out.
Anytime.
Guess I'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Yeah.
See you next week.
Peace, everybody.
Take it easy, y'all.